February 21st, 2024. Welcome to the Path Podcast. My name is Tani. I'm here with Auk. Hey, man.
Hey, Tani.
Good to be here with you. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be here with you, too. Sorry, I just have to do this. Your collar is flipped up.
Thanks, man.
All right, my pleasure.
Wow.
Oh, gosh.
That does feel better.
Okay.
Was it like popped, like 80s style?
Not quite. It was
Not
just
quite.
kind of mangled.
Just disheveled.
Right.
Like Woody Allen style.
Right. I don't know. Now is my hood like all...
Well, thanks for taking care of me.
You're welcome.
How you been?
I've been doing well. And we were just talking about how it's a small world. Jake, who is our producer and editor, ran into a former pathlete at outside of the shop. So Tim is a former pathlete. It's thanks
Tim G.
Yep, Tim G. Thanks for making contact with Jake in a small world. Shout out, and thanks for the kind words on the podcast.
And thanks for all your time as a pathlete.
Yeah, for sure.
It was good.
I also ran into somebody, I don't know their name, on the trail. And I was riding at the Oaks, pedaling with a friend, and passed a guy and said hello and greetings and commented nicely on his bike. I think it was a Santa Cruz, maybe a tall boy, possibly.
Was it yellow?
No, I think it was gray.
Okay.
And so, anyways, as we were pedaling along, he's like, "Is that Auk?" It sure is. Love the podcast, man. So thanks for the kind words on the podcast.
Can't even leave the house. No, that's
Exactly.
awesome.
I love it.
I always love running into podcast listeners.
Yeah,
in the
for
real
sure.
world,
right?
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. It was good. Anyways, so it's a small world. It's been a good week.
I love it. I love those stories.
Yeah, for sure. Man, we got a lot of good stuff.
Start off with a little news.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, new shop hours. Big deal for the
Oh, that's
Path.
huge.
Open till 6, 7 days a week. So instead of 10 to 5, 10 to 6, starting February 26th. So by the time this show is out, the new Path hours will be open till 6. Come hang out after work. Sit at the bar where Auk and I are sitting and heckle us a little bit, maybe.
Yeah,
Not
for
too
sure.
much.
I mean, you'll be here. If you show up on a Wednesday, you might be on a recording Wednesday. You'll probably be here as we're getting set up.
Yeah. Or maybe come by, for lunch. Anyway,
Yeah, for
for
sure.
those, really the reason we're doing it, the main reason we're doing it is because a lot of our customers let us know that they were just having a hard time getting here for their repairs during the week,
Right.
within their work hours, and that if we could be open till 6, it would be really helpful. And it's something we've been working out the staffing to be able to do it, because we wanted to launch it at the same time at all 3 stores to eliminate any extra confusion.
Right.
And so we're ready and we're doing it and we're stoked. And I think that we will get some faces that we haven't seen. We changed our hours. We cut our hours to 10 to 5 during the pandemic.
Right.
So it's time to go back to longer hours. And I bet there's some people I'm kind of looking forward to, maybe there's some people who just couldn't make it that we're going to see now and see some old faces. And in the early days of the Path, there was often kind of a lot of the locals would come just hang out at the bike shop.
Right.
And maybe that'll start happening again too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that'd be fun.
So is this going to be the 7 days a week?
7 days a week.
7 days a week, 10 to 6.
Yep.
Oh, fantastic. I will definitely be able to take advantage of that,
That's cool.
because I am one of those people. The 5 o'clock hour just prevented me from getting here.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty normal to have to work till 5.
yeah. And now that both my kids are out of the house, that hanging out again might start up a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, this is great.
Other shop news or just news. The Sky Park Women's International Weekend starts May 4th. I think that's something to put on your calendar if that's your thing.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I think they did this last year and
Believe
maybe
so.
even the year before. I think saw some posts about that, and I think we've talked to Val about that on a previous show. That sounds like a great event.
Yes. I'm excited about a new product. There's a new bike that's kind of sort of out. Like will definitely be out by this podcast, and we'll have some in stock by then. It's the new Fluid VLT from Norco.
Right. 140 rear and 150 front.
Mixed wheel.
Mixed wheel. That's fantastic. Mixed wheel. Straight out of the box.
400 watt hour battery. I expect it to be somewhere in the low 40 pound range, like 42-ish probably.
Yeah.
And
it's got a Bosch motor.
The new, I've never seen before in person, Bosch motor, right?
Oh, yeah. It's the SX.
Right.
Not the CX.
Right. So lighter weight, smaller package, more stealth looking. There's pictures of it on the Norco website now. Have you seen them?
I have.
They look really, really good.
They do. Oh my gosh.
If I had the chance to ride one tomorrow, that would be the bike I'd want to ride tomorrow.
Yeah. Any bike you want to ride tomorrow, what would it be?
That's the one I'm the most curious to try right now. A lot because of that motor. I'm excited to try that motor.
Yep.
But also that bike just looks dialed. 64.5 head angle.
Yeah.
Pretty money geometry.
Yep.
Nice lines.
Yep, for sure. It's got, look at that. Look at the chain stays, 432.
I'm okay with that.
I like that. I guess, is that on the medium? That's probably on the medium. Is this a size specific chain stays?
Yeah,
maybe?
I bet it is. They tend to do, 432, 436, 440, 444. Excellent. So on the one that has a reach number of 472.5, they're 436.
Right.
And I think that's the one I would get. I'm not sure what they're calling that size, but there's one with a 422 reach, one with a 447 reach, 472.5, 497, and 522. So lots of sizes for lots of riders. I would say 522 is good for really, really, really tall guys, like double extra large reach.
Right.
That's a very long reach XL, right? I think, or properly long reach XL.
Correct.
And 472 is kind of right around my favorite number right now, I think. So that would be 436 chain stays. Interesting. I'm okay. I'm not too stressed about the fact that they're 4 millimeters longer than the other two smaller sizes.
Right.
I'd probably take, if I could put, I wonder if you can put the 432 stays on the medium.
Oh, interesting.
Because I do believe on those, it's probably an actually different chain stay, or it might just be a different mounting point on the front triangle. Hard to say.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that last time. Sometimes it's the same.
Yeah. Sometimes they use one rear end and multiple, or just different mounting points on the different rear front triangles.
And talk about a bike that looks, it's like a stealth e-bike.
Yeah. And I've been thinking a lot about this general category, I've been thinking a lot about SL e-bikes and why they're rad. And I feel like a lot of the market, a lot of kind of the general conventional wisdom hasn't quite viewed them the way I do. And I've been kind of like trying to think about why.
Right.
And I was more specifically thinking about it in terms of the relay, but this bike is kind of a great keyhole look at this idea through as well.
Right.
And it's this. If we look at most of our bikes around the shop and the people we ride with and the people we want to ride like,
right,
we look at their bikes. You're going to see a lot of every part. There's trade-offs being made between how it climbs and pedals, and how it descends, and how it handles when you're turning and braking and jumping and everything.
Right.
And if all of our bike, unless you're looking at our downcountry bike or something,
right,
or a few outliers in the shop, everyone's bike, every single choice is made to be fun on the downhill and fast on the downhill and competent and durable and safe on the downhill.
Right.
Bigger, heavier rotors, thicker rotors.
Right. Tire
bigger,
selection.
1,300 gram tires.
Right.
I used to run 700 gram tires.
Right.
The difference on how they climb is tremendous. To run 700 gram tires versus 13, it's a tremendous difference on acceleration and climbing.
Even 1,000 gram tires. I feel like 1,000-gram tires are the
And I
new
really do
700s.
prefer to climb with 700-gram tires,
Yep.
but I don't ride them.
Right.
And in a lot of these trade-offs that I'm talking about, as we make the choices for better descending and better handling in aggressive situations and stuff, the bikes are kind of generally getting a little heavier.
Yep.
Okay, so I think this is the curveball for some people. A 45-pound bike descends so much better than a 55-pound bike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about that too.
So it's a couple of layers of difficult to see the beauty of it.
Right.
One is we're so ingrained to think of heavier isn't it. We're allowing it to get heavier to make it go downhill better,
Right.
or to be safer on the downhill, or to
right,
have
right.
the brakes work better, or the suspension work better, or the tires work better.
Right.
And frames too have gotten heavier.
Right.
To be better, to be stiffer, to be more solid feeling, to be able to have the reaches that we want, and all that, and made it heavier. And it was
Right.
all to make it go downhill better. Really,
Right.
we could all run 130 stems and climb all day.
Right.
And not that would be better per se, even for the climbing, but that's a side note.
Right. Right.
But my relay goes downhill so much better than any full powered e-bike I've ever ridden, for me, for how I want to ride downhill.
Sure.
And it doesn't go uphill quite as fast as any of my full powered e-bikes. It doesn't go uphill nearly as fast.
Right.
Well, nearly as, I don't know, nearly is a funny word. It may be on full boost to full boost. With me putting out the same effort, I would say it goes uphill at least 2/3 as fast.
Right, which is pretty significant.
It's a big give, right?
It's a big give, right?
But the other thing is, it still goes uphill better
Faster.
than any muscle
Sorry.
bike, and
Almost
it goes
like a spin on
uphill
you, sorry.
as good as it goes uphill better than a lot of SLE bikes too. And then this new one, and your Trance is an example of full power with this kind of
Right.
weight and
Right,
trade-offs.
right.
And this new bike from Norco, I think for that kind of all mountain category,
Right.
is gonna really it's gonna really kind of show that capability I think this motor has a fairly low torque but a high peak output,
Okay, right.
which I think that translate to it may not accelerate as fast as like our Fizuas, but it might carry speed better.
Right. Maybe it has the ability to help you get up that extra steep little segment, peak output.
I may be wrong. This is I know just enough to get in trouble on this topic, but I do believe that that's more a torque thing. In my understanding, I think torque and horsepower have some overlap in where they're beneficial, different kinds of power. But I think the steeper and punchier it is, the more it's the torque that's really getting you up it. Maybe,
So
and maybe some of our engineer listeners can chime
Help
in
us.
and tell
exactly.
us what's going on here.
But it's an interesting one because I think I was seeing that the weights on that Norco, the fluid BLT, is supposed to be like 42-ish.
That sounds. I didn't see any published weights yet, but if you did, I believe you, and that's kind of what I was guessing.
I felt like I saw somewhere, and this was maybe this was on some of the spy picks from late last year.
I think that's what a lot of kind of comparable bikes with Fazua motors and Shimano EP8 motors weigh.
Yep. Like the Cannondale just released a SL e-bike. It's got a 62.5 degree head angle. I think it's a
Pretty cool.
140, 150. Maybe it's 150, 160.
Jason from Halters told me that thing rides well.
Yeah. So, and that thing, I mean, according to the article, was 39 to 42 pounds.
62.5 degree head angle.
Yep.
Just like a relay,
Just like a relay.
but with a little less
A
travel.
little less. Yeah, I think it's going to ride very different. It also has I didn't quite understand this, but it said a horse link, but instead of having the pivots, it has flexible stays.
Oh,
That sounds like a flex stay.
yeah.
Right. So
Unsold. Give me my money back.
instead of a pivot, it's got a flattened chainstay at the rear where the pivot would be.
We talked about this on a recent
We did.
podcast, right? The suspension design.
Yep.
And the bumper sticker is I feel like when the shock starts to become overwhelmed, the rear end continues to move without the shock.
Right.
And it's bad.
Yep. And that's not a horse link, it's a flex stay.
That's interesting though. Is the kind of flattened out flex area on the chain stays in this case then instead of the seat? Because usually it's on the seat stays.
This is on the chain stays.
But there's no pivot. It's just a flex point.
Yeah.
That's different than
your standard flex stay.
The standard flex stay, it's the seat stay that flexes.
Right.
So it's like if the pivot was like a Kona flex stay versus if the pivot was like a transition flex stay.
Right.
Which I think there are a lot more weird twisting loads in that zone than there are on the seat stay.
Right.
And I wonder what that's going to do to that flattened out area. I'm sure the engineers at Cannondale, it took a lot of effort to say that correctly right there. I'm sure they thought that through.
Right. But that's a super light.
It's not fair, but there's like a street joke, crack and fail. That's what
You almost said it. But
I almost said
it. I almost said that street name. But in that class, super light, 62.5 degree head angle.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a lot of things are right. It sounds like it uses an EP8 motor.
EP8 motor, right?
And they're claiming full power but special tuning if I read the documentation correctly.
Correct.
So that's interesting.
Which is very much like the Trance.
It's like if a Rise in your Trance had a child.
That is true.
But also had another rear end.
Right. A different suspension design. And or you put a angle set on the Trance.
Yeah. But I really, really think that the world is gonna I really think that riders everywhere are gonna discover the beauty of bikes like the Relay.
Yes.
That get you up the hill just fine.
Yep.
And that's what we like.
Yeah.
Just get you up the hill just fine.
Right.
So that you can enjoy the downhill optimally.
Right.
And I really, really we know from our downhill racing days that it's okay for the bike to get heavier for downhill.
Right.
But there's a point where it starts to have diminishing returns.
Right.
And I'll add to that, like I always liked my downhill bikes to be at least in the low 40s.
Right.
And I would try to get them under 40, but if they were in the low 40s, I felt like they handled well. The 50-pound downhill bike, you couldn't maneuver it the same way.
Right. There's this like a 26-pound downhill mountain bike might be a little light.
Very.
And
I think the lightest downhill bike I ever had was 38.
Right.
And I think probably I had 2-piston brakes on it.
Right.
And some other like not that great ideas just to kind of see how light I could get it.
But if you could have like magic downhill tires, downhill casing tires, and infinitely light coil shock and all of that, and you could make a downhill bike fully capable, just 26 pounds, would it still be too light?
I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I think it's just so hard to say because we would never be able to find out because we're so far from having the technology to do that that it just sounds flexy and stuff.
Right.
I do think there are some benefits to a little bit heavier bike sometimes.
Right. That's what I was. Is it like this? It gets better, and then it passes a point where it's too heavy, and then it's not as good.
I think a certain weight bike deflects a little bit. As the bike gets heavier, it deflects a little bit less.
Right.
I think.
Right.
And I think that adds a sense of stability.
Right.
But I also think like all stability, sometimes it starts to feel like too much.
Right. Yeah. Like that 58 pound, 59 pound full power long travel e-bike.
Yeah, and even 50.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe 50 might be.
Too much is a funny word, but I feel like I had a 50-pound full power e-bike, my Bullet.
Right.
And that was an awesome bike. I really, really enjoyed that bike.
Right.
And there were times when I felt super confident on that bike for me.
Right.
And I have nothing negative to say about it at all. And you could do more laps on it than you can on a relay, and you can keep up with friends that you can't on a relay as far as e-bikes and all that. But the relay goes downhill better.
Yeah.
A lot better. And I think it's mostly the 5 pounds lighter.
Yeah, I would. Okay. Yeah. Can agree with that. Yeah. That's,
and part of it too is as the bike at 50 pounds, it's difficult for me to pick the front wheel up. At 45 pounds, I can still pretty much do it with confidence.
Right.
And I know that's there's a breaking point on all these things, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I think with new battery tech, you could get a relay fully competent at maybe 43 pounds.
When's that coming?
Well, I was looking at maybe that's how the Fluid VLT and the Cannondale are getting down to that next.
More watt hours per pound.
Yep.
I did see Cannondale's claiming the most watt hours per pound.
That's what they said. And that VLT is so light. Like, how did they get it so light? It's a 400 watt hour battery with a reducer.
I mean, that's about the same as a Heckler SL with a 400 watt hour battery. I think a Heckler SL without even carbon rims might be that light.
Is that right?
I think so. 42? In that range for sure.
Yeah. But 40.
Yeah, 40 is really light.
Like if that
well,
VLT
also a flex
really
day helps.
Is the VLT a flex day?
Oh, no. I'm sorry. I got the wrong bike.
So the VLT is saying
40 at the lightest?
40 to 42, yeah.
Okay. I bet you that the XX Reserve Heckler SL is about 40.
Wow.
I would be curious. I think we have one we could weigh later.
Right.
But I bet you it is.
Yeah.
And I don't think that bike is really any heavier than a Rise, and Rises can get down to 38 with the Fox 34, which you shouldn't do.
Right.
But
right.
But a Fox 36 isn't 2 pounds heavier than a 34 either.
Battery tech, if you could shave a pound or two off of a battery, that would be phenomenal, right? And a 400 watt hour battery at a pound or two less, that would take the relays.
I think that's that as a percentage, that sounds optimistic to me.
Yeah.
Because how much a 400 watt hour battery, I'm guessing, weighs about 5 pounds, give or take. So to take a pound off it, I
want to go over to that relay and strip out the battery.
So and just even if it's more, it's between 5 and 10 for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Which means 2 pounds is between 20 and 40%.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's where I get my
pound is like 10 to 20%.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a 10-pound battery either. I think 10 pounds is more a full-powered battery.
7 pounds?
Maybe. I think we were speculating on a previous show that it's about, I think it's about a pound per 100 watt hours, give or take. Like, I think the 725s are about 8 pounds.
Got it.
Maybe, give or take.
Sure.
So, yeah, I do think batteries are going to get lighter. And maybe they will get 10, 20%, 40% lighter. I mean, over time, I don't see. Sure. Who knows?
Yeah.
People keep talking about batteries getting lighter, and maybe they will.
Yeah. But all that to say, I mean, you could really end up with a future relay type bike in that it's not unrealistic to think like that bike might get down in the low 40s.
Okay, so if that bike were a not e-bike, I think it's safe to say it would be between 36 and 38 pounds.
Yeah, so you'd have to have
So I think the motor is a few pounds.
Yeah.
That's where I'm like...
maybe you are just getting to 42, 43.
Maybe.
42.
Maybe. And I also think an XX relay with an air shock and carbon rims and everything is probably 44, 43.
Yeah.
and in the 160 setting, not the 170 setting.
Put like an X2 on there, and a non-coil 30.
Well, there's the stock build that comes with an air shock, dual 29, and I believe it's Carbon Crank Brothers wheels.
Right.
I bet you that builds under 44 pounds, maybe.
Yeah,
maybe. And the sale. Do you see the sale prices on the relays?
No, I haven't.
So our bike, or my bike,
right,
the one that used to be, I want to say 11 grand, is on sale, I think, for 8 grand.
Oh my gosh, what?
And and they're all kind of that level of discount. They're flying off the shelves at those prices, needless to say. So, yeah, they're finally selling how I thought they would sell in the first place.
Right.
I thought so. That's the nature of today's marketplace.
You're right. The relay is impressive.
I think a lot of people were hesitant on the Fazua too.
I have had no problems with mine.
I was just looking through all the bikes in here for service. I don't think any of them are Fazuas in for warranty, and we seriously have hundreds of riders on them.
Right.
We did have one customer, I think we mentioned, had 2. So it's that kind of thing. If you're the customer who had 2, it feels like they're all bad.
Right. Right.
But we've had customers who had 2. I've had a customer who for sure had 2 of certain other motors. I mean, it's not any motor can have bad luck.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So I might be. I still wish that there was a range extender. This weekend, I think I'm going to go ride on the relay.
Yes.
And I don't know. I'm not believing that anything is coming soon at all.
That's probably true. Well, by soon, probably not this month or next month.
Right.
Maybe this spring still.
Really?
That's what they've been saying. That's what they said.
Right. So I'm going to be riding up in the San Gabes this weekend. Maybe I will ask if I could borrow your battery.
Are you going to do the shuttle?
No, I don't think the shuttle is running anymore. So you got to self shuttle.
Okay.
But I don't know. We might just pedal up from the bottom.
Okay.
But I do kind of want to take the relay.
How many feet of climbing is that?
I think it's going to end up being like 30 miles and 3,000 feet of climbing.
I bet you could do it on one battery, but you can borrow mine too for range anxiety reasons.
Right. So,
I mean, unless
Mission Workshop. Sorry, remember I think the last show we were trying to remember. My Mission Workshop backpack might actually work. It doesn't have an e-bike, a battery holder, but I think it might work. But
how many runs?
How many runs?
That's not really the kind of ride you measure in runs, but you kind of could.
Right. How many runs? On this one, we might hit sunset twice.
I had this realization that certain rides and certain groups and certain I tend to more measure my rides in runs.
Measuring your bike
runs, or that was a long run, or
right.
We got 5 runs in Laguna, or we got 10 runs here, or 3 runs at Oaks, or
right.
So
how many up and downs?
Yeah,
some people talk in terms of distance.
Yes, mileage or elevation gain.
Right,
and
time.
I enjoy all those types of rides too.
How about time?
Yeah, 3-hour ride, 2-hour ride.
Right.
I hadn't thought of that one in this most recent conversation but for sure, time.
So, so you and I hear
my
that
favorite
too.
rides are measured in runs.
Right. Oftentimes that means shuttling.
It could, but
it could be self-shuttling these days.
If I go ride Laguna,
right,
I pedal to the top and I think of it and how many times I went downhill.
Yep.
Down a trail. How many trails I went down.
How many up and downs? How many downs?
Really. When I think about it, I don't really think about what trails I climbed too much.
Right.
Unless there's a reason to, we went up stair steps. It was I haven't done that in a while. It was kind of hard.
I went up Mathis twice. Yeah. That's a a really big climb. But runs. When I text you sometimes on what I did, it's all just the downhills.
Yeah.
These are the trails that I went down, not up. Right.
You got to those trails.
Right, exactly.
I think some people also might talk about watts on the ride.
Oh, interesting. Yep, that is true. Sustained watts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Average watts. I don't know,
Average
maybe.
watts. Oh my gosh.
Peak watts.
I speak in terms of time quite often, because it's interesting when somebody who maybe doesn't ride bikes or maybe knows of what, quote, I don't know, biking on a they've ridden bikes in their lives, and so they ask, oh, how many miles did you do? I went on a mountain bike. Oh, how many miles did you do?
Right.
And it's like when people from out of town ask you how far LA is, you tell them it's about an hour and a half with traffic,
Right.
So, no, I didn't ask you how long it takes.
Yeah.
How hard.
Yeah.
Me and bikes is like that. They say, I went on a mountain bike. Well, how many miles was it? And I said, well, I rode for about an hour and a half.
Well, and if you tell a roadie how many miles you did, they're going to underestimate your ride.
Right. Like
on the mountain bike.
It was 10 miles.
Yeah.
That's
a really short road ride usually.
Totally. I don't think they would not even count it as a ride or whatever, but
unless it was really steep hill repeats for
right, exactly, which is kind of what we do.
Right.
And but yeah, runs.
Some people measure it maybe in like hugs and smiles, like Maxwell Stoke, like
right.
Shoot, man, that was a good ride. Yeah. Oh yeah, how many hike bikes?
Every good ride has at least one hike bike.
Views, sunsets, panoramas, rainbows, wildlife. Dude, we saw 3 forms of wildlife on that ride.
Exactly. Types of landscape maybe,
or concussions.
Oh gosh. How many flats? Mechanicals.
We used to measure rides in mechanicals.
And
because bikes
no
used to be that bad.
Isn't that?
I mean, good or whatever.
Right.
I mean, it was a great era to ride when it was more of an adventure because bikes were less worked out.
Yeah.
Mountain bikes were less worked out.
Like flats on a mountain bike ride, you could have.
It was, if you went on a mountain bike in the era of tubes and 500-gram tires.
Right.
If you went on a ride with 3 people, one of them was going to get a flat.
Yes.
And if you went on a ride with Maxwell, he was going to get 3 flats.
Right. Yeah. So flats was a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting. I think you mentioned this the other day that you got a flat at the start of a ride for the first time in you can't remember how long.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's flats on a mountain bike ride.
Flat tires, because flat pedals, that's a different story.
It's like
these days when we say flats, we mean pedals.
Right, exactly. Oh gosh, changes in vernacular. That's actually awesome. Yeah, runs, self shuttles. Yeah, how many batteries? How many bars?
Yeah. Oh yeah. How many pills?
How many pills? Right.
How many pills left on your e-bike charge?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. So it is interesting. Okay, so on the reduced power thing versus full power, I really don't know how much that could only come into play if you've got multiple people on full power and somebody on a reduced power, and the full power people are just getting after it.
So
like everyone's roughly the same shape, and the people on full power are getting after it.
I know a few people who hesitate to buy a relay because they're worried they won't keep up with their friends who have full power e-bikes. And they're partly right.
Right. Because if your friends are getting after it and want to get after it and they've got full power.
And they are.
And are you more fit than they are?
But also, if Tom, my buddy Tom,
okay,
if he were to have a relay and his buddy Kevin keeps his full powered e-bike, maybe his wild.
Right. Okay. Sure.
Eventually, one of them might have to get a different bike. And I think the hypothesis of the average rider is the opposite of mine on how that would play out.
I think that the full power is going to sell theirs and get it.
And it depends on the trails they're riding, and no 2 riders are the same. But, if someone with a 34-pound enduro bike is riding with someone with a 25-pound downcountry bike and they are going to go ride Laguna every day, sometimes that person with the 34-pound enduro bike will end up being on a downcountry bike so that they have a better kind of match with their friend. But more often, I think
the downcountry will end up with a...
Because they're going to go down I mean, I guess it depends if what they're going to go ride, but if they're
Tom
going to
and
want to be
Kevin
going
are
down
gonna-
mentally sensitive
Yep.
and car
Yep.
wreck and
Yep.
stair steps and
Yep.
Laguna Ridge and
Right. TNA or
and-
whatever. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if they're going to want to go down those trails and try to like develop their skills on those trails,
Right.
they're going to have more fun on a bigger bike.
Correct.
And I just feel like for a lot of
The skill
it
development.
really
on
does
the-
depend
yeah.
on your ride fantasy, right? Like if your ride fantasy is measuring the ride in watts and in calories and in
Yep.
timed on the climb and all that, which a lot of riders it is,
Right.
then that group is going to. But also, as you buy that full powered e-bike, understand that that's who you are.
Right.
You're like the XC guy of e-bikes.
But I think on the if Kevin and Tom are riding, and they're riding, and somebody has a full power, full weight e-bike, that's a long travel.
I just feel like in a lot of cases of two friends,
Yep.
the person whose whose bike lets them do cooler stuff on the downhill
Yep.
is
It's
going to
gonna-
have less like bike envy than the person who
Yep.
lets them go up the hill
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah.
At least in my circle of friends.
Yeah, and I think if you just have two riders, I don't think that the full power, reduced power is enough to make a difference.
Now, in the current marketplace with the Vazua not having a range extender and that being a lot of the options for a lot of the
Yep.
cool SLE bikes, if you want to ride a long way, the conversation changes a little
I agree
bit.
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
But man, that Vazua is efficient. Like you could totally do Harding Joplin, right? Did you do that?
I haven't.
Well, okay, so I recently did a ride that was like, I forget the stats, but I remember being shocked that it only used 2 pills.
Right.
And it was like it felt like maybe half of a Harding Joplin run almost.
Wow.
You know, like,
I'm tempted to try Harding Joplin on it, but I don't want to end up in the. I think the first time I do Harding Joplin on it, I'm going to take an extra battery.
you have done like rides over 3,000 feet of
I
climbing,
have.
right?
I have. Yeah, I feel like I've gotten up to like 3,600 feet of climbing.
Which should get you there.
I think Harding Joplin's like 42 or 40.
Oh, do you?
I think so.
By the time you climb out of Old Camp and
Yeah.
everything, maybe I'm not factoring
It's like
enough
27. It's like 27, 26, 27 miles with 4,200 feet of climbing or something.
Oh,
like
I
that.
thought it was under 4,000, but I believe you. It feels like a million to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh, that's interesting.
Maybe if you do the Cook's Corner shuttle thing.
Oh, you're including the climbing on the road to get from Cook's Corner
See,
to.
I felt like I felt like I just did this ride, and doing the Cook's Corner thing was 4,200 feet. Maybe I'm mistaken.
You have to check your Stravas.
I do. Maybe as we're talking, we can.
Before the show, I think anything else on that?
No.
Before the show, we were talking about the new Maven Brakes from SRAM.
Oh, right.
SRAM announced those to shop people who have, the people like Brian and I who have to buy them ahead of time.
Right,
like,
right.
Under an NDA and everything. And on the announcement, I was pretty underwhelmed about the idea. I wasn't excited. And neither was Brian,
Right.
really, I don't think.
Right.
Like, SRAM's making a new brake. It has mineral oil. Why? What?
Right.
And I went to SRAM did a online product presentation where
Okay.
one of their tech reps
Right.
presented the brakes, talked about them. And there were 2 slides in the presentation that caught my attention and pretty much really caught my attention.
Whoa. Okay.
So the first slide that caught there was a lot of talk about the brakes. There's a lot of cool little features about them and everything, but the thing that really got me first was they were showing power curve graphs of a lot of some popular brakes,
Right.
including theirs. And so on one axis was braking power, and on the other axis is lever pull force
Yep.
from
Yep.
your finger.
Sure.
And each
Pull my
curve goes
finger.
up. What's that?
Pull my finger.
each curve kind of goes up differently, and it shows code brakes pretty powerful,
All right.
and then it showed MT7s over the codes.
Okay.
I was like, oh, okay, so you're telling me that MT7s are more powerful than codes. Like, you kind of have my attention.
Right.
Like, SRAM is telling me that somebody else's brakes are more powerful than theirs. Like, and that is also my perception.
Okay.
Like, if a customer asks me, hey, do you think MT7s are more powerful than codes? I'm going to say yes, and Zach's going to say yes, and and Jeff's going to say yes, and and probably the internet's going to say yes, and so okay, interesting. And then they showed also the TRP DHR Evos even over the MT7s. And I was like, I kind of thought the MT7s were more powerful, but that's cool. Those are super powerful and more powerful than codes, in my opinion. And this was like kind of, they all had a different ramp up curve, right? But most of them were either more powerful or less powerful across all finger force ranges.
And the codes.
And each other as well.
Right.
Like most of the lines didn't cross each other.
Oh, got it. Right.
And then they showed the new Mavens above all of those.
Whoa.
And I was like, okay, like deliver on that. That'd be pretty impressive. Like, and I believe that they're probably testing fairly and accurately representing the test, especially since the other ones kind of matched my perception.
Right.
And also what I perceive to be the public's perception.
Well. Of course.
Although I do think a lot of people would say MT7s are more powerful than DHR Evos, but that's kind of a nitpicking point, and they were close, and they were both at least above the other ones. So, okay, cool. Like, I'm interested now.
Right.
Then they start talking about mineral oil versus dot fluid.
Okay.
And I wish I wrote down the numbers or had them handy, but they were like, here's the boiling point of dot fluid. Here's the boiling point of mineral oil. Dot fluid's higher.
Right. So
cool.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After mineral oil is not hydroscopic, I believe is the term.
Okay.
So it doesn't absorb water. Is that what it is? Anyway, mineral oil is more stable. So they say at 1 year, what's the boiling point of dot fluid? What's the boiling point of mineral oil? At 1 year, the boiling point of the mineral oil is higher.
Interesting.
This also matches the general perception that mineral oil brakes require less bleeding and less maintenance.
Right.
Most people don't bleed their brakes every year.
Right.
Even people who, if you come into maybe I'll start recommending more brake bleeds to people with mineral oil. But if you come into the path and you have 1 year old brakes and you're like, should I bleed these? And I say, do they have good power? And I feel them and they feel firm. I'm going to say, I don't know if I would. I don't know if you need to do that. But maybe they do, because maybe their boiling point has gone down below mineral oil.
Right.
So let's say most people don't bleed their brakes even every 2 years unless there's an issue.
Right.
I think. Right. So if this is the case, like, over the use of the brake, people are going to get better performance out of mineral oil than dot fluid, maybe.
Oh, that's interesting. But a freshly bled dot fluid is going to
have a higher boiling point.
Yeah. But how hot does it actually get? How much of an issue is it?
They did say the temperature of the boiling point. I think that there's a drastic reduction in performance somewhere around the boiling point.
Sure, I agree. Do these brakes? How long do these brakes have to get applied before they get to that?
Oh, right. Well, I think it's different for different people in different situations. If you've ever overheated your brakes, that was how long.
Right.
And I'll say, if you want to overheat your brakes, just go ride and drag your rear brake on a long descent and don't use your front brake. You'll overheat that thing real fast.
Right.
And if you have a problem overheating your rear brake, you're probably doing that by accident.
Right.
And you can fix that by shorter, harder bursts of braking and using your front brake more.
I feel like you could get your brake pads, you could get your rotors smoking, like where you smell it, without overheating your brakes.
I think you smell the softer the resin pad compounds at a lower temperature than you do, and it depends if you have any contaminants on there that you might be smelling.
Yep.
But yeah, you get that heat just generates aroma.
Right. Who was I? I forget what ride I was on, but yeah.
There's also rotor heat versus pad heat versus fluid heat.
Yep. That's what I'm talking about. Is that you can? But to your point, dragging your brakes, you can definitely boil your proper braking. How often do you boil your? Do you think you get to that?
So there's also how much do you weigh?
Right.
And there's also kind of like what is proper braking for the situ. I honestly feel that faster riders are going to tend to boil their brakes less, but not always. Just for example, so like sometimes in some situations the faster rider might boil their brakes to a situation where the other rider doesn't. But then in general, two riders going down the same trail, the slower rider is going to boil their brakes more
because they're
using them more.
Right.
And probably the faster rider is really good at using them in short, hard bursts too.
Right.
So all that, and uses the front a lot, and so all that to say, I sometimes overheat brakes. It's also rotor size. We used to overheat brakes a lot more when we had 160 and 180 rotors.
Exactly.
I weigh about 175 right now. My riding weight tends to be between 160 and 175.
Right.
I would say I don't usually burn brakes unless it's steep for more than a few minutes.
Right.
Like steep enough that I constantly feel the need to control the speed.
Right.
And for more, and that usually translates to a high speed 20 to 30,000 foot descent before I even have to start thinking about like skin suit.
Not 20 to 30,000 feet, but 2 to 3,000.
2 to 3. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So like skin suit.
Like skin suit. High speed,
lots of braking for a long time.
Yep.
I think skin suit a fast time is plus or minus like 6 to 14 minutes kind of thing.
Right.
Like, so around 10 minutes of like a lot of braking.
Right. A lot of high speed, wide open.
And
yeah.
Okay. There's a, this is funny. I do think it somewhat has to do also with the ambient air temperature.
Oh, interesting.
Just a little bit, like not, okay. So one time there was this customer who was complaining that their brakes were continually failing, and we're like, yeah, you're overheating them. And the customer was like, I don't know, it's not even a hot day. so I almost can't say this with a straight face because I just think of that.
right, exactly.
But even rotor thickness is a factor.
Yeah.
So if you've ever noticed, sometimes a really worn out rotor tends to get glowing hot faster, like it's thin and it doesn't have enough material to absorb all that heat.
All great points. Yeah. Yeah. Now I would, even at 175, you're by no means a heavy rider.
Compared on the curve of Americans.
Right. And these days you're probably running 220 on the front and 200 on the rear.
A lot, certainly on e-bikes.
Right.
That's the other thing is if the bike weighs another 10 pounds, that adds to it as well.
Yeah.
And I also think heavier wheels carry more rotational inertia, but most of those things are pretty the big ones are the mass of the rotor, the duration of the descent, and the duration of the braking. I think.
Yeah.
To that point, though, too, the amount of fluid in the system, and the Mavens have giant master cylinders, so like more fluid to
heat up. Right.
So some XC brakes have tiny little masters and don't hold a lot of fluid. Those are going to overheat. Even if you run big rotors with those, those are going to overheat faster.
Sure.
And also brake pad size.
Right. So I suspect the Mavens have large brake pads.
Big pads, big calipers, big rotors.
Right.
Big brakes. And brakes do just keep getting bigger. Mountain bike brakes, when we first started having disc brakes, the standard size was 160.
Right.
Bigger, more aggressive riders for trail bikes would run 180s, sometimes 200 in the front.
Right.
And Now 180 is pretty much the standard trail bike size, sometimes 200 in the front. If you're a bigger rider, for sure, bigger brakes.
Yeah.
And also most of the original hydraulic brakes were 2-piston. There were exceptions.
Yep. Now
pretty much all of them are 4-piston.
4-piston, right. Mavens are 4-piston?
I believe so, yeah.
Imagine.
I mean, and when I say I believe so, I just, in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're not 6-piston.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Like, are we making
They're
a jump
not 2-piston.
Are we making a jump to 6 pistons?
That could happen, right? Although there's also, you could just make the pistons bigger.
Right.
So.
Right. I wonder if circular pistons are the optimal.
It seems like every brake piston I've ever seen on
It's
any
circular.
vehicle is circular.
Yeah.
And I think it probably is.
Yeah. There's a reason.
Yeah. There are reasons, dude.
So I presume since we're talking about this, these are going to be out before the show airs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They better be.
Dude,
no, they are.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, after the show, we can go in the back and look at some.
I would love to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is fantastic. What else is going on?
Other news, we got in a bunch of the Ransom e-rides on sale for $59.99.
Oh my gosh.
180 travel Bosch motor bikes that they're well received. People love those bikes. Big, bad Bosch e-bikes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just came off my tongue.
That was impressive. That was impressive. Oh my gosh. Did you read about I was so stoked that you guys are getting the Crestline bikes. And did you see the news?
I'll let you say it.
Gwin's like part owner?
Yeah, Gwin invested, I guess, in Crestline, and he's also putting his new team that he's putting together on the bikes.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
It is. So that probably means they're going to release a run of their downhill bikes as well as the e-bikes.
That is one of the things. Okay, so when I talked to Crestline, they said they weren't sure if they were going to make more of the downhill bikes anytime soon.
Right.
That was obviously before the Gwin thing happened. I can't imagine that they're going to have Gwin on a bike that they're not going to ever sell.
Right.
That seem, who knows? But maybe Gwin just wants to ride a good bike, and he's willing to pay to make that happen, and it's going to create like brand awareness for some model down the road.
Right.
I don't know, but I feel like if you had Gwin on a bike, you would want to be able to sell some of them.
Now, if that actually happens and you were to buy a Crestline, what would you get? Downhill, and you couldn't buy both. You'd buy one. Downhill or into their e-bike.
I can't buy both?
You can't buy both in this world. In this hypothetical world.
I don't like this world.
I know, it's not a good world.
I need both. I haven't had a downhill bike in a long time. I guess I'm not so sure where I'm going to fit a downhill bike, how often I'm going to fit a downhill bike into my life right now, so I'd go e-bike.
Right.
Although there's I could flip that into, I haven't had a downhill bike in a long time. I've had lots of e-bikes lately. I need a downhill bike.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Downhill bikes are rad.
Yeah.
There's something kind of unbridled. One time I got home from a road trip and the weather had been kind of crappy on the road trip back to SoCal, December, and it's like 78 and sunny, and I decided to ride my DRZ 450 Supermoto to work, and I kind of took the long way through the hills and did some twisted turns, and it felt like I was flying, and it was just so good to be home. And also you just feel like you're invincible on a dual sport and I don't quite know how to explain the connection, but there's something about a downhill bike that's like that.
Right. Just thinking about it
it's
makes
just
me
free,
feel
and it's free and powerful and fun, and just feels like you're wrapped in the universe's love. Like,
just thinking about a downhill bike, I'm having kind of that sensation. I wouldn't have been able to express it like that, but yes. I hear what you're saying. So Aaron Gwin, and Crestline, we're stoked that this partnership has come together.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to seeing the Crestline bikes here.
100%. Yeah. Yep. I was looking forward. I mean, I was excited about the Crestline bikes when I thought we weren't going to be able to sell them.
Yeah.
So
if I had to, if there was an e-bike, even more than the Fluid, that's the bike that I would want to ride.
if I could ride either one of those tomorrow, it would be a difficult choice because the motor that I want to try, I want to try that new Bosch motor.
Right. The SX.
Yeah. It would be a difficult choice.
I feel like the Fluid is such a it's a unique bike right now.
I also think that
Not to say that the Crestline isn't a unique bike.
I'm just not so sure I'm a full power e-bike guy. There's that. I don't know. I don't currently have one in my quiver.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'm really hankering for one. And I'm pretty sure that if a range extender came out for Fazoo, I really wouldn't be.
Yeah. I'll tell you.
I kind of want to test that theory though, by taking it on certain rides and seeing what happens. Like e-bike rides, like group e-bike rides where they are going to try to drop you on the climbs. But maybe it's a group and maybe some of them weigh 220. Right? And
right. That situation I don't think was going to the 220 person's going to have to be really fit to drop.
Well, but also just how bad are you going to get dropped? Like, are you going to be out of touch? Like, are you going to be inside of the last person? Or are you going to be, not getting waited for? Like, see what it,
Right.
Because if you're inside of the last person, they'll wait for you.
Totally.
And if that's the case, then you'll get to be maybe move towards, I don't know. If that's how it plays out, then I'm good with that.
I feel like I did back-to-back rides on my full power super light of the Trance and then the relay, 2 days, 2 consecutive days, same route. I think it was 36 or 3,700 feet of climbing. So I was using the full battery on the relay. I think that ride took me 25 minutes longer on the relay than it did on the Trance.
And how many? What was the total ride length to give me a percentage perspective? Maybe 2 hours.
2 hours,
plus or minus 2 hours.
Yeah.
So 10%, 15%.
Yeah. But you think on a 2 hour ride, 25 minutes is a long time. 20 minutes is a long time.
Yeah. And you were, yeah.
I was on both rides. I was getting after it because I was like, I'm just going to get after it. The first day I was like, that's how I ride when I ride
almost
by
wouldn't
myself.
have been surprised if it was a bigger difference.
Yeah.
Because a 30% difference wouldn't have really surprised me.
Right. But maybe I was making up time on the downhills on the relay.
Yeah, you might have been.
Yeah, because this was before I did Zach and I did the mods on the Trance as well.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
I do find if I'm going to...
Also, though, too, your Trance is a rare beast. Your Trance is mid-40s in weight, I believe.
Yep.
The bikes I'm fantasizing about trying to hang with are all mid-50s. So that's going to give some back.
Yep, that will. I rode with the guy who was probably 270, full power e-bike, 90 Newton meter e-bike actually. I was on my...
Is that a Rocky Mountain or a new Specialized or what is that?
It's a Specialized. And then I was on the Trance. And I think I was toggling between 2 and 3 bars. And he was mostly full power the whole time.
Right. And also, to this point, I also think that it really still a lot comes down to the rider. So if you're riding with fitter riders, if you're the more fit rider, you could run the less torque.
Way less torque.
And because when I ride with more fit riders, they get to ride on like middle while I ride on full boost too. So there's that just for other perspective, right? Like,
right. I was surprised that it was that much of a difference.
Really?
Because when I ride full power versus 2 bars, it's like, I feel like it's a different bike. You know what I mean? Like, ride a full power e-bike on full power versus 2 in the same like park area, whatever. It's, to me, feels like, so that's why I was like surprised. Like,
you thought it would be more difference?
I thought that he wouldn't have had to ride full boost.
Oh,
you know, because we were riding. It was conversational. But yeah, that was really interesting. I mean, in more than one ways than in more than one way, he's twice the man that I am.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, so Gwin and Crestline. The Crestline e-bike.
And can Gwin get back to his winning ways?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, too. It's been a while since he's really been at the top of his game.
Right.
And also, has the game changed since then?
Do you think that this arrangement will allow him to be more focused on just racing, I wonder?
Well, he's still going to be divided. He's got his bike park to pay attention to as well.
That is true. That is true.
But I think, hopefully he's healthy. I think injuries have been a big factor the last couple of years.
Right.
I also think the sport has continued to evolve. I do think there's a lot more kids who have been riding bikes in America and all over the world as young people, mountain bikes these days. I also think, for downhill racing, what do you think? There's a physical peak for downhill racing, and then there's a mental peak for downhill racing and other things, right? But it kind of seems to me like the physical peak for downhill racing is probably around 21.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, could be. And since these kids are starting younger and younger, like the rippers, the Grom rippers that you see now, it's impressive.
So it's a sport of explosive power.
Yep.
It's a sport of physical resilience.
Right.
It's a sport of all out over like less than 10 minutes. These are all a young person's game.
Right.
You do see some veteran riders who continue to be competitive into their late 30s.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right.
And even early 40s sometimes.
Right.
And they tend to be the riders who are a little bit more mental about the game.
Right.
And they tend to be the riders who take the outside line, not the inside line.
Yeah,
not that that's faster or slower,
right?
But it is definitely more sustainable.
Right.
Like,
right.
Think Menard, right?
Sure.
Like he tends to like the sweeping line rather than the cutting inside line.
Right.
And I like that style of racing too, like smoothing it out, making it look easy. And all that.
Right. Do you think that like being able to stay focused through your youth with that goal of, being World Cup, podium in the World Cup circuit. Like I saw a documentary with Shohei Ohtani, and when that guy was in high school, he put together this like matrix of this was his goal, and there was like 8 boxes. Like, I'm going to get drafted number 1 by any of these 8 teams. And then like each of those boxes had like other goals, time and physical. And then each of those goals had smaller goals built around them. And it looked like, it was an 8.5 by 11 with full of this grid and how all of these things fit together. And he was, from the time he was in early high school to the time that he, is where he is now, or until the time he made it to the MLB, like all of these things were getting checked off. And the focus that took without being distracted through the teen years, right?
Yeah.
You think that the younger generation is having more of that? More people are having that?
Well, there are a lot of people. So even if it's
You're
a small percentage of them on bikes.
Right. Higher number of people, perhaps
More
the same
participation.
percentage, more participation, right?
Generationally, it does seem to me as though the younger generation is the young, like what generation Alpha
Alpha.
and Generation Z,
Right.
the two kind of emerging young generations.
Right.
What I think they're known for, like being better at self-care than us, for example,
Right.
and that would be good for athletics.
Sure.
I think also like there might be a little bit less alcohol and drug use than historical youth
Interesting.
generations,
Right.
which might also benefit
Sure.
athletics.
Sure.
But more than that, you remember Ben Bennett?
Yeah.
Great kid, worked at the Path,
Right.
awesome rider.
Right.
Came out of NICA. Kind of like he's been shredding and pedaling hard since probably was 12 or something.
Right.
And then you look at like young Honeycutt, Elliot Honeycutt,
Right.
shredding at like, I don't know, 3, 4.
Right. Exactly.
And you think about how people are getting involved in the sport younger and younger and more of them.
Right.
And I pick, Ben's a great athlete, but he's not like a 1%er type athlete, I don't think. He's an almost 1%er type rider because he's so just
Right.
fearless and dedicated and rides so much and loves it so much.
Right.
But probably if I had to guess, he's not born with anything too extra
Physiological.
He's not
like
that
advantage.
much of an extraordinary.
Right.
He's an extraordinary athlete, but he's not like that. But think about if enough of those kids are doing that, one of them's going to be a different kind of. One of them's going to be that kind of athlete that could have been good at like one of the big sports, right? Like they call them like real athletes, right? Like, But
Right.
there are these people who are kind of superhuman,
Right.
right?
Because they've been given better than perfect vision. They've been given a higher lung capacity. They've been given
and more
different
muscle density and
whatever it is, right?
And better,
Whatever.
better bone
Guys
alignment
and girls, right?
And better
And
better
just-
nervous system.
Correct.
Like better
Correct.
hand-eye
All of these
coordination.
things. Sure.
And then maybe got good nourishment and all the other nature stuff that
Right.
builds on that too, right? So I do picture like some amazing stuff happening, some kind of superhuman kind of performances.
Right.
There's also the thing with this sport where it shares a little bit, the downhill racing in particular, I feel shares a little bit with like MMA and like the fighting sports.
Sure.
And that there's like a little bit of undue risk. Like it's a
right.
little much and like not really always for like maybe some people's mothers would wisely rather they don't do it kind of thing.
Right.
So there's that other side of it a little bit, which also plays into the whole, how much can you win by being willing to risk more than the next person?
Yeah. Right.
And I do think, I think there were times where I felt that was what Gwin was doing,
Right.
that he was winning by a combination of he's a brilliant rider, right?
Right.
Brilliant rider. But compared to some of the young talent, it seemed like he had to try harder and risk more.
Right.
Maybe.
Right. Willing and able to in that
To win
zone
that
of
race.
risk. Yeah.
And so, I wonder what we'll see with the future of kind of like super athletes, but also super like born riding,
Right.
like people who don't, like Luke doesn't remember much pre mountain bike racing.
Right.
Like,
Right. And his kids are going to be even
right.
Is
And so,
right.
right.
Even more so.
Yeah. The future of riding is exciting, and the equipment keeps getting better too.
Yeah.
And then the courses evolve with all of that, and it'll be interesting to see. Part of me hopes that it doesn't turn into like, I don't want to see 60-foot doubles all the time on downhill courses or like
Right.
huge, like right now the courses, if you ever get to ride one, most riders, I think most of us, even myself included, a lot of times probably overestimate our ability to ride those courses, even at all.
Right.
But you can look at it and almost feel like you could ride those courses, you know?
Right.
And I kind of don't want that to change.
Right.
I don't want the courses to become so like a supercross course. I can't imagine riding a supercross course.
Sure, of course.
And I don't want the courses to become something that the average person who's like pretty good at the bike park should be able to imagine riding the downhill race course.
Right.
Maybe in my like world of romantic ideas.
Right. But like the things like the hardline competition, you like can't even imagine that, right? Like
I can't imagine trying to do the Red Bull Rampage runs.
Right.
And it would be cool to see a race down something like that, but it's not the sport of downhill racing that I am like in love with. Right. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, that might be a podcast.
I think that's a podcast.
All right. Thanks, Auk. Thanks, Jake. Thanks to all the riders out there, and huge thanks to everyone who works at the Path. And Eve, also huge thanks to everyone who shops at the Path. Let's all remember to love the bike we ride.